Going on, everybody? Bobby O'Brien here. Today I got an awesome video for you, basically going over why nobody can ever maintain their weight loss results. And why is that? Well, 60 to 70% of the American population is overweight, yet 60 to 70% of the American population is doing the same thing. And I'm not about to say eating a whole bunch of processed foods like everybody else. The majority of people, whenever they look for a weight loss solution through a coach, through an influencer, through the internet, or wherever, they start with a caloric deficit. And they see some initial weight loss results just to see all the weight come back on very, very quickly. And we're going to go over some randomized controlled research as to why that happens and the solution, the root cause of the problem, which is optimizing your hormones, right? Your hormones are dysregulated. That is why you are gaining weight. Insulin is dysregulated, ghrelin's most likely dysregulated, and leptin is most likely dysregulated. And if you've never heard of those hormones before, you've never heard the names, you don't know what they do, stick around to the end of this video, and I'm going to cover exactly how each of these hormones function and help you to lose weight consistently, and how you can apply that information into your busy lifestyle today in a simplistic fashion so you can lose weight consistently without having to count or restrict a single calorie, without having to pull up a macro calculator or do any of the bullshit that any other fitness coach would put you through. So leave a like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Follow me on Instagram at itsbobbyo'brien. Without further ado, we'll get right into this video here today. So we're going to cover some research first, just basically breaking down why a caloric deficit is not sustainable. If you've watched my video where I've basically dismantled a caloric deficit in the past, you've probably seen the study, and you're probably going to see the study, or probably have seen the study that I'm about to reference here in a second. But before I do, most influencers and most coaches are going to be very big promoters of a caloric deficit, and they're going to reference research that supports their claim, right? Rightfully so, just like I am. But I will say that fitness influencers and coaches that reference research basically showing that a calorically restrictive diet or a caloric deficit works, which it does. It is undeniable that if you move more and you eat less, you expend more calories than you take in, you will lose weight, you will lose body fat, but it will come at a price. You will increase the hunger hormone ghrelin dramatically. You will suppress your satiety hormone leptin. You could dysregulate the most important hormone of all for weight loss, which is insulin. You can increase cortisol. You can increase sympathetic nervous system activity. And you can also slow down and decrease your metabolic rate, which is the last thing we want if we actually want to lose weight. And all the research studies that fitness influencers and coaches reference whenever they want to promote their caloric deficit or their approach, very simplistic, idiotic approach. I don't know why that thumbs up is there. But anytime a fitness coach or an influencer is referencing research about a caloric deficit, showing some weight loss results, showing some fat loss results, it will never take any of those side effects into account. Maybe it does, but they're not highlighting that. I'm not sure if you've met a fitness coach or an influencer that references, what exactly happens to insulin, what happens to leptin, what happens to ghrelin, what happens to cortisol, or what happens to your metabolism in general whenever you're doing a caloric deficit. Because I certainly have not seen a fitness influencer or coach in the online space actually go over this stuff, because they don't, right? They really don't. And we're going to go over exactly what happens at the physiological level, right, whenever you are doing a caloric deficit, and why that is the root cause of the problem in the first place. And I just had to pre-frame that because the root cause of the problem is not being addressed in many of those research studies that are referenced by most influencers that promote a caloric deficit. So we're going to get into that right now. So this study right here, comparison of weight loss induced by daily caloric restriction versus intermittent fasting. This is a 52-week randomized control trial. Once again, if you've watched my video on a caloric deficit and how I dismantled it, you've seen this study already. So we're not going to go too in depth because I've already covered it tremendously already. But so you can see in the introduction, however, adherence to a daily calorically restrictive diet decreases remarkably over time, and many individuals regain significant weight by 1 year. I wonder why. Maybe because ghrelin is increased, leptin is suppressed, and their metabolism is slowing down. So the moment they go off this diet, even for 1 day, the weight comes back on. And the whole idea of maintenance calories too, that's total bullshit as well. If you go through your first 12 weeks of a caloric deficit and then you're just meeting your caloric limit each and every day just so you can maintain that weight loss, you're still going to dysregulate the function of your hormones. Even in that state, it is going to happen. Because if you just take a look at it here, long-term persistence of hormonal adaptations to weight loss, another study that I've referenced a million times, weight loss led to significant reductions in levels of leptin and increased levels of ghrelin, right? So once again, leptin is a satiety hormone, decreased here. Ghrelin is a hunger hormone, saw a decrease there. And peptide YY, which I did not highlight here, is another satiety hormone. And that was also reduced. So, once again, same old, initial weight loss results in the first 8 to 10 weeks. Most programs are 12 weeks, right? So they'll take those initial weight loss results like you may see here. Big steady drop. Susan lost 20 pounds in 12 weeks. And we did it through a caloric deficit or, through my calorie calculator or whatever it may be. And then it slowly starts to tick up here, right? Slowly starts to increase. And why is that? It's for the reasons that we just mentioned, right? Increase in ghrelin, suppression in leptin, increase in cortisol. Excuse me. Of course, chronic brain fog is another symptom. Increase in sympathetic nervous system activity, as well as a decrease in your metabolic rate. And the thing is when all those things happen, your hormones are dysregulated and your metabolism is slowing down. You have one day where you go off your diet, it could screw the whole thing up. And let's be honest, we're human. It's going to happen. You can only take so much of that bullshit until you just say, screw it, I'm going off the diet today, I can't take this anymore. And you really, really suffer because your hormones are dysregulated. But if you follow my approach where we actually optimize the function of each one of these hormones, even if you do have one bad day, it's not going to kill you as much as it would with this. So here's probably the number one reason why it's so unsustainable, right? This is basically the measurement of their hunger hormone, ghrelin, after they were done eating. And it was measured in what's called postprandial time, which is a function of a hormone, basically once it is excreted. So once ghrelin was excreted by the human body, right, this is what happened. So once they were done eating, this hormone stayed elevated, and they continued to stay hungry. I'm not sure if many, honestly, I am positive that many of you that have done this caloric deficit or have done caloric restriction in the past, you most likely can recall at least 1 or 2 meals where you get done eating and you're probably still hungry because your body's not getting what it needs. You're not getting calorically satisfied. You're not getting fully satiated because leptin is still reduced, and you get that as your end result, right? So the reason why, really the biggest reason why this is just so unsustainable is because of this, right? You're going to constantly be hungry, and that is no way to live. The fact that fitness influencers and coaches are going to sit here and tell you that the reason why you're overweight is because you are just eating too much is too simplistic and too idiotic. And it is outdated science and total bullshit, just like I say in all of my videos, for reasons like this. So I'm sure you're starting to see it now. These things are not underlined in any of these studies, even if they are a randomized control trial that shows that caloric restriction works initially and has, aging or longevity oriented benefits because they're losing weight. That's considered an aging related benefit. They do not talk about what happens to ghrelin. No one talks about what happens to leptin. No one talks about what happens to your metabolism, cortisol, or your sympathetic nervous system, brain fog, and so many other things. So even if you go through a maintenance process, you are still restricting yourself. You either have to make 1 or 2 decisions in a maintenance process. I'm not sure if any of you have gone through that process before. It's most likely you have if you're watching this video, but basically means that you're meeting your caloric limit, but you're not exceeding it, right? That's basically what it is in a simplistic way. So if your caloric limit is 1,200 calories, you're not in a deficit anymore because you're not expending 1,200 calories. And the only way to actually put yourself in that position is by, you know, still following a caloric deficit, but you're not expending that much, to the point to where, you know, many influencers, many coaches will say that, you know, that's going to basically regulate your hormones again and put you in a position where your hormones are functioning optimally again, but it really doesn't, right? Because you're still restricting yourself of calories and you're not solving for the root cause of the problem. And even if you're going through a maintenance process and you all of a sudden stop working out just so you can meet that caloric limit and not expend past it, now you're not working out. Now you're going through the bullshit maintenance process, right? However long that is, 1 or 2 weeks, let's say you maintain that weight loss for a little bit longer, you're still not solving for the root cause of the problem, which is a dysregulation in your hormones. And especially if you're eating garbage foods and you're following that advice from many other influencers and coaches that say, oh, you can eat whatever you want as long as you're in a caloric deficit. I mean, that is the biggest bullshit ever. If your metabolism is slowing down and you're simultaneously eating garbage foods, you know, you may, depending on who you are, how metabolically healthy you are, you may be able to lose some weight, but it will not be sustained for those reasons, right? A combination of unhealthy food that's not going to give you very healthy, holistic insulin response is going to put you in a position most likely to gain weight, plus to slow down your metabolism. It's going to be a train crash. And that's why these people who had a hard time adhering to a calorically restrictive diet for all the reasons we've gone over already saw a steady increase in their weight, almost increased just as much weight as when they started, but a big chunk of it, right? The majority of it. And this was 62 weeks, right? You know, going through the full cycle here, the full swing. So, I mean, I love bashing on a caloric deficit because there's so many ways you could poke holes at it. It's just way too simplistic and it's outdated science. But, you know, simultaneously, this is really upsetting to me as a true coach that wants to help people. I see people every single day doing this, just seeing the same old results. And I can't tell you how many times I've been on the phone with potential clients that I'm about to work with, and they tell me exactly what they've been through. It's the same old story. Went through a caloric deficit, even went through a maintenance process, and I was able to maintain it for a little bit. Then went back on the caloric deficit again, and I just couldn't maintain it anymore because I just felt so terrible, felt hungry all the time, and it was just way too restrictive and just not a sustainable solution, right? And here's the other thing too. So a lot of coaches and influencers will also say that, you know, the reason why you'll see, you know, regression in your weight when doing a caloric deficit is because you're simply not following it. And that is extremely stupid because they're still not accounting for the root cause of the problem, which is your hormones. I know I'm sounding like a broken record in this video, but it's just coming back to the same theme here. The reason why you're regaining all this weight is because your metabolism has slowed down because you've restricted yourself of calories and overall fuel for so long that it has to adapt, it has to slow down its metabolic rate, has no choice. And you simultaneously have dysregulated your hormones that are critical for losing weight and critical for sustaining that weight loss. It's not because you're no longer doing a caloric deficit. It's because you've basically discombobulated your hormones. You're not solving for the root cause of the problem. So let's solve the root cause of the problem, shall we? Let's start with the first hormone, ghrelin. Miss it here. Ghrelin, your hunger hormone. This is the hormone that is stimulated when you are hungry and you're ready to eat some food, like this guy right here. So this was a study where they basically injected people with ghrelin, right? You know, serum forms of ghrelin. And you're going to see what happens to these people whenever, you know, in the ghrelin group here, so to speak, in this randomized controlled trial, whenever they have, you know, exogenous forms of ghrelin being injected into them. Food intake and appetite were significantly higher with ghrelin compared to the placebo group. Oh, wow, that's very surprising. And of course, body weight loss was significantly lower in the ghrelin group than the placebo group, right? Which is why you probably saw the results from the previous study. If ghrelin is stimulated all the time, there is literally no way you can just sustain that the rest of your life, constantly be hungry, have no satiety, and just feel like shit all the time and be able to sustain that. No one's going to be able to do that. Everyone's got a breaking point, even me. So, leptin, your satiety hormone. Another very important hormone for weight loss. So here's another RCT looking at the importance of leptin here. Weight loss from baseline increased with increasing dose of leptin among all subjects. Now, whenever they had an exogenous form of leptin injected into them, they saw benefits, right? As you can see here in the results of this randomized control trial. And why is that? Because they were far more satiated and were putting themselves in a position to use their own body fat for fuel because they already were physically satiated. And when that happens, you're able to lose more weight. If ghrelin is functioning optimally, where you're not hungry and leptin is stimulated properly, and you're fully satiated after you're done eating, you no longer have to wait, just a couple of hours to eat again. There's a lot of other coaches too that will tell you to eat multiple meals to boost your metabolism and meet your caloric window with each meal. Once again, more bullshit. But if you eat to satiety and you're eating high quality foods that give you a good insulin response simultaneously, that's the hormone we're going to go over next, you will be able to, one, increase your time-restricted eating window, which is basically the window of time in between your meals, and you'll also be able to use your own body fat for fuel, which is exactly what we all want to do here. So, also, insulin, right? The ultimate predictor of fat loss, the ultimate predictor of how much body fat you're going to lose or gain. This is the ultimate hormone that you want to optimize for if you're looking to lose weight consistently. It is an anabolic hormone that is responsible for fat storage. It takes glucose, right? Substrate that can be derived from literally all three macronutrients by way of carbohydrates in a very simplistic fashion, or it can be derived from even fats or protein through gluconeogenesis. We're not going to get into that, but if insulin is elevated for a long period of time, it is most likely storing glucose into your fat cells and accumulating either subcutaneous or visceral fat tissue. Visceral fat being the fat that's built up around your organs, subcutaneous fat being the fat that you can actually visibly see on your skin. So, depending on the current state of the body, how metabolically healthy you are, depends on if you'll see visceral fat accumulation or subcutaneous fat accumulation, but doesn't matter. We don't want to see any of it accumulated at all. And we can see really good insulin responses by eating higher quality foods that give us a really good insulin response, such as eating higher fat and higher protein foods, eating natural sources of carbohydrates, such as simple and complex carbohydrates being from fruits and vegetables. And of course, we want to avoid the foods that actually give us a very negative insulin response, where insulin is initially postprandially spiked, right? You get an initial postprandial spike in insulin, and it goes back down really, really slow, so staying elevated for a long period of time. That's what we want to avoid. And that's the problem with eating processed forms of carbohydrates, sugars, and seed oils. And now you can see why it's a problem that many fitness coaches and influencers will tell you you can eat whatever you want as long as you're in a caloric deficit. It's not solving for that problem, the insulin paradigm, the ultimate predictor of how much body fat you're going to lose. If you're just eating whatever you want, you're eating processed garbage, you're still going to spike insulin even if you are in a caloric deficit. Either way, doesn't matter, caloric deficit or not, you are going to spike insulin with garbage foods that you put into your body. It's as simple as that. Now we're looking at an RCT, looking at the importance of, low insulin, right? An insulin response is good as long as it comes back down just as fast as it came up. So simple carbohydrates, use the example of fruit. Let's say you eat an orange, get an initial postprandial spike in insulin, but it goes down just as fast as it came up, right? So it may store some glucose in the muscle, inside the muscle glycogen to use as short-term fuel, or it could be utilized immediately by the body for short-term fuel in other ways. Now, what we want to avoid is what I just talked about earlier, insulin staying elevated for a long period of time. But nonetheless, lower levels of insulin definitely can be good for losing weight because you're not constantly storing glucose into your fat cells and accumulating body fat, right? Subcutaneously or viscerally, right? The fat you can see or the fat that you can't see that's around your organs that will increase to an overall risk of mortality. So, in conclusion, the low insulin method included into the multi-component occupational healthcare program, blah, 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 could be an effective and promising new approach for the reduction in body weight and long-term weight loss maintenance in people with overweight, the people that are overweight or are obese, right? So, and it makes perfect sense. If you have lower levels of insulin, you are not constantly storing body fat, and you're not putting yourself in a position to accumulate subcutaneous fat or visceral fat by adding body fat is also going to be very low. Does that mean your insulin needs to be low all the time? No, but it does mean that low levels of insulin can certainly yield to more weight loss. So now you're starting to see what the real root cause of weight gain is and how to solve it. So the solution is to eat higher fat, higher protein foods from animals that are of high quality that are going to give you a good insulin response. And simultaneously, eating natural forms of carbohydrates such as fruits and vegetables that are going to also serve you well and give you an initial postprandial insulin response, but you'll see it come back down just as fast as it came up, just like we said earlier. And avoiding the foods that are going to keep insulin elevated for a long period of time, such as processed carbs, sugars, and seed oils. So that is the ultra-specific scientific breakdown of these three hormones and why a caloric deficit does not work. And really, now you should know why most people do not maintain their weight loss results, right? And there's definitely some nuance that comes with, managing your insulin levels, making sure you're getting good hormonal responses, making sure you're getting fully satiated, knowing which foods to exclude or to include. But it all falls in that same theme, right? Higher fat, higher protein foods in combination with some natural carbohydrate sources. No need to exclude all three. Maybe for certain people, to do a lower carbohydrate diet, such as a ketogenic diet, carnivore diet, just for the short term, just to kind of modulate the function of insulin. But then almost every time, want to transition you into eating a little bit more in the way of natural carbohydrates, just so you can get insulin functioning properly. So if you want to know how you can get your insulin hormone functioning properly so you can lose weight consistently and know exactly how you can get a good insulin response each and every time you consume anything, so you can lose weight with each and every single meal, message me on Instagram at It's Bobby O'Brien. You can message me the word optimize so we can start optimizing the function of insulin today so you can start seeing amazing weight loss results like many of my clients. You can check out the client results on my highlight page, and you're sure to know that based on everything you've seen in this video, if you do click on those highlight results, in that little highlight page, right, it should say transformations actually. None of those people counted a single calorie. None of those people did any cardio, and they did not have to get out a macro calculator. They did not have to do any of the same old bullshit that many fitness influencers and coaches take many of their clients through. You do not have to do that either at all. And just so you know, just so you have some background, I'm sure you already have it. But once you take a look at those transformations, you'll know damn well that you can lose weight consistently without counting calories and without being in a caloric deficit, as long as you are optimizing the function of your hormones by eating the right things and working out consistently so you can boost your metabolic rate. So once again, if you want to find out how exactly I can do that for you by customizing a fully made plan that is tailored just for you, to your limitations, to your anatomy, to your physiology, and most importantly, your specific weight loss goals, message me on Instagram or book in your one-on-one call with me today to speak with me directly, and we can start fully customizing that program today so we don't have to waste any time and we can fully adapt it to your busy schedule. So hope you enjoyed the video. I really enjoyed going over this stuff. I always love picking on a caloric deficit and all these stupid fitness influencers. And really, we got to talk about it because the overwhelming majority of people are doing this today, and it's simply not working. And I want to give you a sustainable solution that actually works. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.